heart of Edwards Air Force Base, a symphony of dedication and teamwork takes flight. Its sacred lake bed, an arena of sand, cradles the echoes and bears witness to the triumphs and tribulations of flight tests. Every takeoff, every soaring achievement is the
It's 2024, IT is still doing what it's doing, but we'll get there. We've got the charts coming up. Hopefully everybody had a relaxing holiday break. There we are for back on holiday. A little bit of Gen AI helped us out again. There's at least 3 different instances, and I challenge you to figure out where Gen AI appeared in the brief. But we've got a very, very special day today. This is a day to step back, focus on some of the fundamentals, take a look at where there might be risk to our mission, risk to our people, and that's the challenge that we're going to have going forward. But before we do that, just a reminder of what we do. This is the world premiere of our new mission video. So next slide, let's go ahead and run the video.
heart of Edwards Air Force Base, a symphony of dedication and teamwork takes flight. Its sacred lake bed, an arena of sand, cradles the echoes and bears witness to the triumphs and tribulations of flight tests. Every takeoff, every soaring achievement is the result of a harmonious ensemble, a testament to the power of unity and purpose. It starts with our educators, who light the spark of curiosity in our minds. Builders and landscapers who transform this earth into a backdrop for innovation. Maintainers, unsung heroes, ensuring every aircraft is ready for the sky, often in the dead of night. Engineers, architects of dreams, designing the future of aviation with precision and ingenuity. Doctors, nurses, and medtechs, silent sentinels of health that keep the heart of our base pumping. Logisticians, skilled tacticians, orchestrating the intricate coordination of resources and supply chains. Defenders, steadfast guardians, providing stability and safety to our people. And don't forget the cooks, clerks, and countless support staff who keep the base running seamlessly, fueling the passion for those who fly. All of these roles, seemingly unrelated, empower Edwards to deliver crucial testing to our Air Force. Here, at the center of aerospace testing universe, we have played a role in the development of virtually every aircraft in the United States Air Force since World War II. Airmen, civilian and contractors that contribute to our success and enable our Air Force to dominate the aerospace environment. Our people are the threads that weave the tapestry of flight. Our belief in a shared dream fuels every endeavor. Our unwavering commitment to excellence sets the stage for greatness. At Edwards Air Force Base, we have made the impossible possible. We prove that the skies have no limits, and we inspire generations to come. Together, we are Team Edwards, testing tomorrow's war-winning capabilities today.
We got at least one standing ovation from Colonel Brown. So when Chief and I watched that right before the holiday, I think we watched about 5 times in a row. Hopefully you saw yourself in the video somewhere, because that's what we're trying to do. It is what you are doing here is incredibly important. Each and every one of you, every single aspect. And it's critical. So as we're bringing the charts back up here, going next slide, next slide. So everybody has a critical part in what we're doing. And it's important for the future of our nation. It's important for what we're doing. Go ahead and build for me. So we test and evaluate advanced aerospace systems. We do it with world-class installation and mission support. And the reason we do it is because we're accelerating that war-winning capabilities to the warfighter. We're not only giving that capability, but we're also, hopefully, as we've talked before, preventing that next war from even happening. As I look forward, where our vulnerabilities are, one of our biggest vulnerabilities to doing this would be if something were to put us at a mission stoppage. And that's one of the things I want you to do today when you go back to your work areas, is identify where are our risks to our mission and where are our risks to the people, and let's eliminate those. That's what the Back in the Saddle today is all about. Because if we were have to take a knee for a mishap, that's going to delay delivering that war-winning capability. It could actually potentially change the equation that we're trying to affect in that calculus of President Xi. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me, please. So you've seen this before. We may very well be in an interwar period right now, and the last thing that we could do is afford to have to take a stop in our mission because we've had a mishap or we've had something else that happened. Every single one of you, the reason that we have that mission video the way that we have it is because all of those mission elements are absolutely essential for doing that T&E mission. And what each of you are doing is important. So we cannot afford to lose somebody for a period of time to not do that mission. So as we go forward today, let's figure out, let's do the pre-mortem and figure out where that next accident might happen, and let's eliminate that risk. And China's moving forward. And again, I say China, we're really talking about the Chinese Communist Party that's leading the PRC right now. Next slide. There are a couple recent events. You've probably all heard about the 9-dash line. Well, it's actually now a 10-dash line. So shortly before a summit of Pacific nations here in the fall, last August, the PRC gave this new map to the UN, saying these are our claims. Here's our territorial claim. There's a little bit of dispute there in the Himalayas between India and China. This has never been really recognized. This is that old 9-dash line, except if you count the dashes now, there's an extra dash right here. That's Taiwan. It's now a 10-dash line. And that was actually a big deal and caused quite a bit of consternation within the Indo-Pacific. It doesn't stop there. Next slide. So earlier in December, this is something that China's been doing for a long time. Of course, you've got they're building artificial islands down here in the Spratlys. These video footage is from the Scarborough shore. This is the Philippines right here. So off the coast of the Philippines, China is, the Coast Guard is harassing a lot of Filipino fishermen. This is a very, very aggressive action. And again, this is the calculus that we're trying to change. This is what we are doing right now, is by developing an Air Force, next slide, that can crack this operational problem. So if you look at the Indo-Pacific, it is a very, very challenging operational problem for the mission planners. The Air Force that you are developing is helping to close that gap. And that's what we're doing, is we're trying to change the calculus that the CCP is doing through so that that aggression that you see from the Coast Guard doesn't turn into a full-scale war, which would be devastating. This is why we can't afford a pause. 2027 is right around the corner. So if something were to happen in the next year, the next 2 years, that were to cause us to do a mission shutdown for a while, that would just delay that capability, and we can't do that. So if you look at the, if you look at this theater, this is an incredibly complex problem. There's no question that it's, the Air Force is going to have a big part of this. If you look at, where the anti-ballistic ship missile rings are here, the DF-26 goes out here. This is the DF-26 right here. 1927. So 2027 is the centennial of a number of significant historical things for the Chinese Communist Party. That's not a surprise right there. So we won't get into the details of the technologies that you're developing, but you are developing technologies right now, or you are providing the mission support or the installation support so the people that are out there developing and testing those technologies so that those are going to be a real thing, that are going to change what this operational problem is. So incredibly important, and we cannot afford any stumbles or any missteps as we are doing that. Next slide, please. So that's our mission. Go ahead and build. And these are all the pieces that do that. So again, this is back on the Saturday. We're not doing anything today except for taking a look at all of the aspects of our mission and where our risks and where our vulnerabilities might be. And that's vulnerabilities to mission, and that's vulnerabilities to people. The testers like to, we pride ourselves as being professional risk managers. And so, here's what we want to do. Go ahead and build for me, or next slide. So there's a concept that we have in test called risk awareness, and it really comes from situational awareness. So situational awareness is a term that we've used for a long time in the Air Force. The earliest accounts that we can really find are among some pilots during Vietnam. It was formalized by Dr. Inslee in 1988. She was actually the Air Force chief scientist here about a decade ago. But this is the formal definition of what situational awareness is, which is essentially taking, kind of the state space of where you are right now and projecting that into the future. That's what SA is. Go ahead and next slide. So there's a concept in flight test that we have known as risk awareness. Risk in flight test comes from uncertainty. And so risk awareness is taking, what we don't know, identifying what we don't know, and projecting what is the impact of that into the future. And this applies more than just flight tests. This applies to your everyday life. I've got three now young adult children, which means that I've taught 3 teenagers how to drive a car. And for anybody that's done that, probably one of the most nervous times is driving through a parking lot, because they have not yet developed the experience to have risk awareness. What I've always tried to tell my kids as I'm teaching them how to drive is cultivate this relentless paranoia. Like, what could go wrong? Okay, you're going down a road, you're 25 miles an hour, and there's a car coming the other way. That car could swerve right into you right now. Like, Dad, why would they do that? It's not why would they do that, could it happen? So it's that scenario development, and that's what we want you to spend today doing, is cultivating that relentless paranoia. What could go wrong that would affect our mission or affect our people? Driving through a parking lot with a kid. They don't, like, which of these cars is going to back up? Every single one of them could back up right now. That's what, in your teenage driver children, that you want them to think about as they're doing. And that's what we want you to spend today doing. We're going to break down into groups, into the work areas, and you're going to spend that time thinking about and developing, cultivating that paranoia, building that risk awareness. Where are we at risk? And that's what we want you to do. So that's a little bit of context. Next, we got safety with a word from our sponsors, the 412 Test Wing Safety.
Go ahead. All right. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Always tough to follow his act, especially with the audiovisual that we had with the amazing video that took place right at the beginning. But yes, while the slides are coming up, I'm Colonel James Hayes. I go by T-Pain. And Back in the Saddle Day has morphed over the last several years into different formats, but ultimately we're getting back to a all call and then down into smaller groups with an ops call this afternoon. Next slide. With this as the standard purpose slide, but really in the bottom right, those are the main things that we're trying to get at it today. The boss had alluded to it. It's time to start, well, not alluded to it, eloquently described that we're looking for all of our risks. We're looking for what our mitigation procedures are and ways to implement those for the entire organization. We have you should have a mishap response plan in your unit. If you don't know what that is or where it is, this would be a great day to figure out what that looks like. And for those that are in your specific or your safety offices as safety officers, unit safety reps, it'd be a great idea to take a look at those, make sure that they are still relevant with what the regulations are as they currently read, because there have been a handful of changes that have taken place over the last year. Next slide. So, as I alluded to, this is today's agenda. We'll wrap up here relatively shortly. I don't think we're going to take the full hour, so we'll give you a little bit of time back. And then at 11 to 12 over at the Military and Family Readiness Center, those people that are AMIC trained or board president trained, and you should know who that is, will have a refresher course for doing mishap investigation. We have Mr. Kress coming over from the University of Southern California. He's an expert at doing mishap investigations. He's bringing some hands-on tools to refresh those skills. It may have been a while since you've gone to either of those courses. He brings a great show. It'll be very interesting. Plenty of times to ask questions with some relevant information of mishaps that have recently occurred. And then the ops call right back here, 1300, if you're safety privileged and you have access to that information, it's expected that you'll be here. I don't think we'll take the full 3 hours, but I do think it'll take upwards of 2, and then we should get everybody out of here relatively early today. Next slide. the first thing I want to do is go over just some real basic stats as far as what occupational safety issues have taken place over the last year and compare it with the last couple of years. And then I'll go in through a couple of scenarios, because I think when you were a little kid, you had all those McGruff commercials come up telling you all you need to do is call 911. Well, if you do that here at Edwards on your cell phone, it will probably go to whatever base you were previously at or wherever your cell phone was, and where your cell phone number is, and you won't get the response that you need. So there'll be a couple of scenarios to walk through real quick. Hopefully it'll be something that will be informative. Next slide. So I know this is a bit of an eye chart, but what I want to show is for the last 4 years, those 4 bars in the middle been pretty much the same. About 30 mishaps, Class C mishaps, which mean that somebody has missed a day of work or more. And with a base population of about 7,000 people, you're looking at about 4 per 1,000 people annually, which is on par with other bases, and it's actually a lot less than bases that have a younger population. So we're doing really well there. And then the best news is we have no Class A or B mishaps, which means that everybody's coming back to work eventually. And we've had that for the last 2 years, and FY24 is off to a good start as well. Next slide. So emergency response, it's basic. It is very much common sense. First thing that you're trying to do is remain calm and remove yourself from the threat. Secondly, apply immediate reaction items, whether that is grabbing a fire extinguisher and putting out a small fire in your break room because somebody caught something on fire in the microwave, or it's immediate first aid, or simply just turning off the sink in a bathroom that's overflowing with water. You probably don't need to call for help for a couple of those things. However, if they are more emergency in nature, calling for help is a big deal. And I wanted to give you guys a few numbers to know, ideally put into your phone, so that if this were to happen while you're out there, you would know which numbers to call. Next slide. All right, technique only, but I do recommend putting this into your cell phone. First name, 911 Edwards. Second name, either medical or the security forces. Those are the numbers you need to have in your phone. If you call those at any point, at any time, there will be somebody that answers that phone and is able to handle it for you to get you the immediate response that you need. You're also never wrong to call Command Post. Command Post is the command and control center that has access to all the checklists, all of the phone numbers, and all the appropriate individuals to call, and it's up to date as of every single day. They run that on a weekly basis to make sure that they're still working. So if you run into any circumstance where you're not sure that it might be an emergency, remember that number, 73040. If you can remember that, you will be all right. And again, as the slide previously said, this isn't just for you. This is for your spouses, for your significant others, for your kids. They need to know what to do if there's an emergency. So please make sure that they have those numbers. Next slide. All right, let's say you're running and you get bit by a rattlesnake. You didn't see it. Ideally, you have somebody running with you. The buddy system is always good. What you don't want to do, don't slash your wound. Don't try to suck the poison out. That is only Hollywood. That will now give you 2 injuries. So don't do that. Don't apply a tourniquet. A lot of people think that that's what you want to do. It is not. I did some research on this that makes things a whole lot worse, actually, because you'll have a lot of swelling that's going to take place, and it will essentially cut your leg as well. And then what you do want to do, put some dry cloth on it, remain calm. Easier said than done when you just got bit by a rattlesnake. But if you can, take a picture of that snake. That will certainly help out later. And then call for help. Ideally, you're not too far away from the road, not way back deep in the desert. Hopefully you have cell phone service. But again, that 3040 for Command Post, letting them know where you are. They'll be able to send out emergency response. Also, medical, they'll have somebody that can come and find you and apply the appropriate medical responses for something more dangerous. Next slide. Next slide. Second. All right, let's say you're walking into the BX and you hear gunshots coming from the base, or from the food court. Obviously, don't put yourself in any more greater of a threat. Stay away, take cover, or get away and tell other people to do so. That's your immediate. And then, yeah, again, call Command Post. In this case, maybe you call the Base Defense Operations Center. If you do call 911 from any landline, that will go to the Base Defense Operations Center. So that's still a valid way to call, but if you don't have access to a landline, which most people, if unless you're sitting in your office, don't, then you want to call the 3340 is the number for that. Again, great idea to put that in your cell phone, and then you're going to want to be able to provide the 5 W's as to what's going on and as much information as you got. Next slide. Finally, let's say you have suspicious activity. This happens all the time, where there's somebody flying a quadcopter, or you notice a quadcopter somewhere over the desert that you're not sure if it's supposed to be there or not. It's just a good idea to, well, one, pull over. Don't be trying to do too many things while you're driving. And then make a call into the command post, let them know. They might already know, and it might actually be a sanctioned activity, but it's better to report it and be able to go from there rather than not have the appropriate response on that. Next slide. Finally, what to do when all of that is said and done. When do you need to call the safety office? Well, this is why you have unit safety representatives. They are your experts in your organization. It's never wrong to call us, and we will happily take the report, but usually go through them first, then give us a call. But if you do need to make a call to the safety office, we have the numbers up here that you can call. Essentially, what is reportable and what isn't is governed by the 91-204 series regs, paragraph 1.4, if you want to go do some reg diving. And it talks about what would be and what wouldn't be. With that information, you can kind of make some determinations on yourself, but if in doubt, ask. Slide. That's pretty much all I had. I just wanted to welcome everybody back. I know this is going to be a very busy year. Pretty much the base shuts down from Thanksgiving to New Year's, but it's great to have everybody back in the seats, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the amazing things that you guys do. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to have Chief Stoltzfus come up as we're switching the slides back. So what you heard in there were an example of 3 different types of scenarios. Those are not the only scenarios that you need to consider. So again, as you go back, cultivate that relentless paranoia and go through scenarios at your work center about what could possibly go wrong. Chief Stoltz.
All right, hey, thank you, sir. All right, hey, how about another round of applause for that video, man? That fired me up. I'm telling you, thank you, Colonel, and the team that put that together. Our PA team just does great stuff for us. And whose voice was that? I think it was a Chief Master Sgt that goes by the name of Tony Higuera, man. He did a knockdown, drag-out job on that. So I think he's departed already, if I'm not mistaken. But, man, I did not know that guy had a voice for TV, I'll tell you. Hey, so when they asked me to come up and talk about safety, I was like, I don't know if that's my strong point. But I had to come up with an idea. And the idea I came up with was how you, as an individual, take care of yourself and how that ties into safety, right? If you're not taking care of yourself and you're not doing well, when you're at work, you can get distracted easily, right? So if you're having issues with mental health, if you're having issues with something that's going on in your household, with a friend, with a spouse, with a significant other, it detracts you from what you need to be doing while you're at work. I can't tell you how many times I've been deployed or how many times I've been at work, and I'm a CE troop, and we work with heavy equipment all the time. And a lot of the injuries and safety issues that we had were caused by people being distracted for one reason or another. Having a clear head while you're at work will keep you safe, and it'll keep your teammates safe. So I ask you, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, and your physical health. And social. That's another one of the pillars. There's 4 of them. They're called the CAF pillars. When I think about some of the things that the Air Force has done over the last 26 years that I've been in the military, they nailed it with the 4 CAF pillars. And if you find balance across those CAF pillars, emotional, spiritual, physical, and social, you got a really good chance of staying level-headed. And when something arises, like you saw on the slide earlier, staying calm in a situation like that because you're focused, right? So I wanted to take a different approach to safety and not show slides and do all that, but I wanted to make it about our team, about you guys. Because ultimately, we stand on your shoulders each and every day, and without you guys, the mission doesn't get done. That's an unemotional fact. The second part is, when you're thinking about that and you're going through your day, do you have an environment in your work center where you feel comfortable enough to say something if you see something? Is it a yes? No? I don't know. A little north-south? Maybe. What if you caused the incident? What if you walked past something and didn't say anything? I'll give you an example real quick. We were up in Misawa, Japan after the earthquake, about 3 days after the earthquake that created a tsunami. And we're out there and we're fixing some facilities, and an individual didn't have his head on straight and didn't lock and tack out some equipment. And a young individual went in there and put his hand in a fan to fix one of the fans, and they flipped the breaker on. The power came back onto the facility. And that individual is no longer in the military with us because somebody didn't take time to do what they were supposed to because they might have been distracted. So taking care of yourself is very important, right? Attitude. Let's talk about attitude for 1 second when it comes to safety. You as a leader, I don't care what rank you are in your organization, how is your attitude and your perception of safety? Oh, great. I got to go to the theater and listen to a safety brief this morning. Hopefully that's not what you're thinking. Your attitude matters, and it matters a lot when it comes to safety. So having the right attitude as a leader in your organization is detrimental to the safety and the effectiveness of your organization. What's the second one I want to talk about? Attitude, culture, right? What is the culture of safety in your organization? Have you thought about that recently? Do you have a culture where people feel welcome to bring you issues and talk about things that they're seeing each and every day? Right? Do you have a culture that when an incident happens, like the active shooter that you just saw up here at the BX, individuals know what to do? They're watching you each and every day. It's an exercise, right? Maybe not. Maybe it's not just an exercise. Your attitude mattered in that situation because they were watching you. And that drives the culture. What is the culture in your units when it comes to safety? And the last one is teamwork, right? Having the right attitude, building the right culture leads to teamwork, right? And teamwork makes the dream work. And if you guys aren't taking care of each other, the team's not functioning. It's not a highly functional team. And we can't afford anything but highly functional teams at Edwards Air Force Base as we go into 2024. I'm telling you, 2024 is the year of Edwards Air Force Base, man. I'm telling you right now. I'm excited about what this year is going to bring for us. And I'm excited about what each and every one of you are going to do over the next year, right? So keep those things in mind. Take care of yourself. Have the right attitude, build the right culture, work together as a team, and we'll be just fine. Remember, safety is everyone's responsibility, and it starts with you. Thanks.
Thanks, Chief. An extremely important message. Somebody's going to get hurt this year. I don't have a perfect crystal ball. If I could tell who is going to get hurt, then we'd eliminate that, right? We remove that, but we don't know. Hopefully, we don't have a Class A. Hope is not a strategy. That's why we're going to spend today doing stuff. I've got a couple stories here of warning signs. When that next thing happens, when somebody gets hurt in a work center, maybe it was because somebody didn't lock out, didn't follow the proper procedures. Something somewhere is going to happen. And whenever we do an accident investigation after the fact, we always identify these series of things that were warning signs ahead of time. Like, oh, this happened and this happened. And so that's what we need to do now. Let's do the pre-mortem, the pre-accident investigation instead of the post-mortem. Let's go through that scenario imagination, scenario development, in what could go wrong. Because, it is about teammates, it is about our people, and we don't want anybody to get hurt. Let's not ignore the warnings. So here are two stories of warnings. Anybody know the story of Apollo 1? Number of hands out there. So that's Gus Grissom. That's Ed White. Both of them are TPS grads, Air Force TPS grads. This is Roger Chaffee. He was Navy pilot. Did not actually go through the test pilot school. He was actually at AFIT when he was selected for the astronaut program. Gus Grissom was the second American to orbit, third American in space, and Ed White was the first American to walk in space. This was the Apollo 1 crew. And we're actually coming up here on the anniversary in January of the Apollo 1 mishap. But there were warning signs. Again, this is the accident report of Apollo 1 is one of those tragic stories. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me. And they kind of knew it ahead of time. So this is actually a joke. This is a parody. This is the Apollo 1 crew in August. So January is when the capsule fire occurred on the launch pad. Prior to that, they knew there were some serious issues with the capsule. Gus Grissom called it a lemon. There were repeated issues, and the program, they were feeling a lot of pressure. You know, it's kind of like 2027 is just around the corner. We got to get there. We got to be ready. And they were just plowing full speed ahead and ignoring a lot of warning signs. They actually, on the back of this card, this was meant as a joke, you know, praying over the capsule. On the back of it, Gus had written, they gave it to Joe Shea, who is the program manager for the capsule development. They said, Joe, it's not that we don't trust you, but we decided to go over your head on this one. So 4 months later, go ahead and go to the next slide. During a plugs out test on the launch pad, a fire broke out in the capsule, and all 3 of those Americans were killed. And again, when you go back and there were all kinds of warning signs that they were not ready, and they were ignored. Go ahead and build this for me. And you can read the quote there from Gene Kranz. They cited the pressure from time. You know, we were in a race against the Russians to get to the moon. That's actually not anywhere near as much. You know, it was the height of the Cold War. But, you know, the race to get to the moon was not anywhere near as important as getting the Air Force of 2027 ready today. So we're under the exact same time pressures right now. There were also all kinds of problems that they didn't have the resources or the time, or they didn't put the resources and the time in to fix. And this brings up this concept, and we see it all times, of drift. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So we have this idea of drift, and drift over time. There's always time pressure on things. Go ahead and build. And there's also, we don't have infinite resources to put against things. And these 2 pressures, time and limited resources, it's a force field. It's a gradient that pushes you, go ahead and build for me, that pushes you, build again, pushes you towards the boundary of a mishap. Unfortunately, go ahead and build final time, you don't know where that boundary actually is. Again, if your crystal ball was perfectly clear, then you know right where that edge of the cliff is and be able to walk right up to it, and maybe give yourself a margin, and be able to peer over the edge of the cliff. But we don't know where the cliff edge is. And that's part of what we want to do today when we're developing that, you know, cultivating that relentless paranoia is kind of appreciating, okay, what warning signs maybe have we been living with for the last couple of years? You know, we've always done it this way. Nothing's ever gone wrong. Well, I've got another story for you on just because something has always worked doesn't mean that we haven't taken an inevitable series of steps closer to that cliff edge and a mishap. So next slide. And the best example of that is Alaska Air 261. So this was you know, over 20 years ago now. I can still remember this. This took off out of Port of Vallarta. It was headed up to Seattle with a stopover in San Francisco. MD-83 took off shortly after, as they were passing, actually not too far off of where we were, or where we are. They were level off, cruising along, and they actually got a trim jam from the horizontal stabilizer. So the way that the design on the MD-83 exists here, it's actually based on the DC-9 design, which was originally certified in 1965. The trim works, so this is the horizontal stabilizer, and the trim for that actually works through this big jack screw. You actually have flight loads being carried on that jack screw. It's considered primary structure because it takes primary flight loads. That was okay in 1965 when it was certified for the DC-9. The airworthiness criteria had actually changed by the time, but again, it was a legacy trim system, and the FAA accepted it when the MD-83 was certified in the early 80s. So the way that this works, you have this motor up on top. This is the horizontal stab right there, and it turns this long jack screw through a nut and adjusts the trim. And that's what had initially jammed as they're flying. So the pilots are, they've got the autopilot on. There's a lot of discussion between the pilots. Hey, do we turn the autopilot off? Do we leave it on? What do we do? We got this jam. Flight controls, they're actually talking to LA Center. They're planning to divert into LAX here as an emergency. And then there's another thump, and they take the trim off, and they lose control, and the aircraft pitches over, but then they're able to recover it, around 24,000 feet or so, and they fly about for another minute or so, trying to figure this out, and then there's a loud thump over the cockpit voice recorder, and the aircraft pitches over and dives 20,000 feet into the sea, killing all 88 people on board. Next slide. It was actually fairly easy to determine what went wrong on this one, because when you recovered the jack screw from the bottom of the Pacific, it had all the threads from the nut wrapped around it. So the nut had failed because all the slide loads. And the NTSB actually determined that it was inadequate lubrication of the nut. Go ahead and build for me. So lubricating this nut, this is a known issue with other designs. And so there was a requirement to initially lube it every 250 hours, every 250 flight hours, to put grease on this so that you don't have metal grinding on metal. It's a very difficult procedure to get up there. It's up here underneath. There's this tiny little access panel. There's the grease gun, putting the lube on there. Go ahead and build for me. And so originally, when the DC-9 was certified, there was a requirement to do this every 350 hours to put new lube on this jack screw. By the time that the MD-83 was certified in the 80s, go ahead and build, it was actually established on every other B check. So every other B check, do this procedure. That equates to about 700 hours, so double. Go ahead and build. 2 years later, Alaska Air got permission to actually extend their B check interval from 700 hours to 1,000 hours. Or actually from 350 hours to 500 hours, which equivalently they kept every other B check, which now you're lubing this piece every 1,000 hours. Okay, go ahead and build. A year later, they actually eliminated B checks and said, okay, we'll do it on every 8th A check, still at 1,000 hours. Go ahead and build. 3 years later, we extended A checks to 1,200 hours, which now means that or A checks are extended to 150 hours, which means that we're now lubing this piece 4 times the amount of time, the interval that we were originally doing it, every 1,200 hours. Go ahead and build. Now we extend A checks to 200 hours. So now we're at 1,600 hours. Go ahead and build. In 1996, then Alaska Air actually moved the lube task to a task card. We'll do this every 8 months. Every 8 months we'll go and we'll lube this piece of primary structure that has a known weakness of metal grinding on metal. And we're doing it every 250 hours. So almost an order of magnitude increase from what was originally certified because it was a known weakness of the system. But that's okay because we actually have a way to check this. Go ahead and build. So you can do an in-play check on the nut. You can actually test how much free play there is between the screw and the nut. And once it reaches 40 mils, okay, now it's time to replace the nut. So originally, when the MD-83 was certified, even though the manufacturer recommended 3,600 hours, hey, every 3,600 hours, check and measure the free play. Alaska Air was doing it every 2,500 hours, so actually better than what the manufacturer. But then 4 years later, they moved it, they doubled it, and said, hey, we'll do it on C checks. Every other C check, we'll actually check the in-play. Then they extended C checks, or actually they moved from C checks to 13 months, which equated to every 6,400 hours. And then they extended C checks again, and so now we're doing this almost every 10,000 flight hours. Which would still be okay if you actually didn't ignore the fact of mismeasuring things. The Alaska Air 261 MD-83 had actually gone through C-check 18 months prior, almost 2 years prior to the mishap in 2000. They did an in-play measurement. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me. And here's the work card from that in-play check. So it's here we are in 1997, actually 2.5 years prior to the accident. So 1997, they did this in-play check, and what we're doing is we're measuring how much wear. The nut is made of a softer material because the screw, replacing the screw is much more problematic than just replacing the nut. So we'll make the nut from a weaker material. We'll let that preferentially wear. That's an easier maintenance action to replace the nut. But that means that, you test, and of course, as it wears down, you can see there's less structure here to carry the loads, and that's what failed on Alaska Air 261, is those threads were ripped off from the nut, and that's what was still wrapped around the screw. So the maximum allowable limit was 40 mils, and 2.5 years prior, again, they're only doing this every 10,000 hours, and originally the lube was every 375 hours, right? And they, this drift over time, it's really hard to get up there and do this, to put the grease on there. Do we have to do it every 350 hours? No, you can do it every 500 hours. No, you can do it every 700 hours. No, you can do it every, almost 3,000 hours. That's a step closer and closer and closer to the cliff. But we've got a fallback, right? We're gonna measure how much in-play there is. Go ahead and build for me. So during the C-check, it was actually measured right at the limit, 40 mils. All right, so here's the maintenance action: replace the nut and perform this tech order, and then redo the test with a new net. So they put Alaska Air doesn't MyCap, but the equivalent of MyCapping for the part. Alaska Airlines logistics is no better than our logistics. 3 days go by, and the nut's not coming through. And so, this airplane's not out there generating revenue. So this was on September 27th, 3 days later. On September 30th, they're like, hey, Mike, go back out there and measure that nut again. And they did. Go ahead and build. They remeasured it. Build one more time. So replace the nut. They measure it again. It's only 33 mils. The limit's 40 mils. Return it to service. No new nut required. It would be another 10,000 hours before that check would be done again. Is that a warning sign? Might there be things like that that we are comfortable doing with because we've taken these little steps? So that's part of what I want you to do today. Hey, you know what? 20 years ago, we lubed that part every 375 hours. 20 years ago, we did this on that interval. Why are we now only checking this every 3 years? Why are we now doing things this way? That's what I want you guys to do in your work centers with your team. And it cuts across all mission areas. There are things in the CDC that I'm sure fall within this area as well. Hey, we used to do X. I don't know what those are. That's what the purpose of today is, so that we don't have an accident. Next slide. So this is the essence of what we're doing today, is go through those scenarios, cultivate that relentless paranoia, start to develop some of that risk awareness so that we aren't back here in the theater after a mishap doing the kind of the return to mission type of brief. We never want to do that, because the mission that we're doing right now is too critically important for us to afford that time. Now, of course, I just put some time pressure on you there, right? That's one of those elements of drift, is that time pressure. We are definitely at a high ops tempo right now. There is a lot going on across we've never been as busy in flight test as we are right now. But that doesn't mean that we need to take unwarranted, unnecessary risks. Anybody here, anybody watching from your work center, you all have the ability to hit that pause button and ask that question and say, is this right? Have we taken those unwitting steps? Have we drifted closer and closer to that cliff because we don't actually know where that cliff is? So that's what today's all about. Go ahead, next slide. There's all the pieces of what we do. Go ahead, next. And so across Edwards, across the team here, again, a critically important mission. Spend some no kidding real time today going through those scenarios, cultivating that paranoia, building that risk awareness, because each and every one of you are too important to what we do for us to have, any type of anything that slows us down. Sometimes slower is faster. So next. And there we go. So time to go start the day. And to start 2024, this is going to be a great year. Really looking forward to it. Carry on, please.